Hello, and welcome to Adventures with Scars. I'm your host, Lauren Huffmaster. This episode is brought to you by Adventure Therapy Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to addressing the emotional toll of cancer. To learn more, go to adventuretherapyfoundation.org. Today I'm talking with Stephanie Abbott, a cancer survivor and former healthcare executive. She's the author of Buried or Planted, 100 plus expert insights from healthcare executives' journey as a cancer patient. Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
So tell us a little bit about your cancer journey.
I got diagnosed with cancer when my son was 10 months old and my daughter was 4 years old. I had just moved cross country from Florida to California and started my dream job, and then got hit with those words that nobody ever wants to hear. And it was interesting because, I think as a cancer patient, or you just go through these feelings and these emotions of why me, and this doesn't happen to me, and what am I going to do now? Just this whole feelings and just confusion. And I know you mentioned this tornado phenomenon, but it's like you go through this just phenomenon of emotions, and I had to step back and pull myself from that funk to say, what am I going to do with this? This is the hand I'm dealt. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. How can I see that sparkle in the darkness? And I found it.
And how long ago was that?
2022.
Okay, so this is all very recent. It's only been a couple of years since your diagnosis. So, in many ways, this is still fresh.
Yes. I got diagnosed on November 12th, 2021.
I was diagnosed on November 11th, so we're so close. Just in
Oh,
different years, but my cancer anniversary is 11/11, so that's so cool. Um,
wow.
so yes, such a recent experience for you. And I like to say this often, but just because our physical body has recovered, it takes a lot longer for our emotional health to be restored. So 2 years after treatment to me is still in this sort of fresh state, the very raw state of redefining your identity, moving through the seasons of healing. So how did the cancer experience impact your emotional health?
In so many different ways. I approach this as I'm a strong woman. I am independent in a sense, right? Married to the love of my life, but I'm an independent woman, I like to say as well. Type A personality, and then going into this having to take a different role in work, family, life, and take a step back and actually rely on others. I think that that was a really hard emotional aspect for me. And then there's also this piece of when you are in your healing process, air quotes, um, you don't you are just not the same you that you used to be. And even though you're learning this new you don't heal as fast physically. You're certainly not healed emotionally. And so you're just continuing having these aftershocks after the major earthquake.
Absolutely. And you said you don't have the same you, and what we call that is a broken identity, right? You have this broken identity. You have to take the pieces back together and decide who you're going to be moving forward. And some of the pieces of our former self fit and some of them don't, right? And so we have to keep gathering them together and decide how to move forward. And like you said, it takes time, and it we can't, until we heal, our family doesn't always know how to heal with us, right? They're still watching us to figure out who we're going to be before they can begin to feel safe and move forward with us. So how did you parent through all of this, all of the treatments and the trauma and the recovery of cancer?
Oh, by the grace of God, we'll say that. My favorite verse is Jeremiah 29:11. And, I feel like it was my faith and my focus on positivity that really helped pull me through this type of trauma. being a parent was hard in the sense that I couldn't always do what I wanted to do or wow, be the mom I wanted to be. And I remember there was one weekend that I had really pushed myself way too hard. I had chemo on a Thursday. Friday, I decided that I was going to do a full day of on-site visits at a couple different clinics in my organization. And I felt fine at the moment, and then I did not get out of bed for, I don't know, like 50 hours. It was so bad. And I remember feeling so guilty because I could hear my children laughing and playing, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I knew my husband was having a great time with the kids and he had it handled, but then my heart also hurt for him because I'm his partner, like there's this tag-in process with your spouse. It's like, "Okay, I've had enough, tag me in or tag me out. And there's times throughout that journey that you just feel like you're letting people down and you're not, but you just feel that way.
Absolutely. We have to give ourselves so much permission or grace or just the right to say, I am doing the best thing that's for me, which is also has to be the best thing for the family. I may not be able to show up, but me getting well, me resting so I can show up tomorrow or the next day, that is actually what's best for me today. As a society, we have such a low value for rest. And so we feel like we have to sort of rationalize anytime we're resting, even when we're in chemo. We have to say, like, I'm so sorry I had to rest. Like, rest is okay. Rest is actually a valuable part of the rhythms of life, but it doesn't feel like it when you're stuck there.
Yeah.
Um, you said you had to focus on positivity, and I use the phrase irrational optimism, right? But there's a lot of pushback around positivity, optimism. What does this mean to you, and how did it help you forward?
I'd like to say that I'm always Miss Sunshine, sparkle everything, but my mind tends to go to the negative. But I've always trained myself to pivot and see the sparkle in the darkness. What's the positivity? Because I don't want to get stuck in that rabbit hole and I don't like to be depressed. I don't like to be negative. So as I went through this journey, and the first thing I did is when I got my diagnosis, is I called a girlfriend of mine who her and I had worked together previously, and she's much more mature than I am in years. And she had gone through a similar type journey, 15 years prior. And as I went and I wallowed in my grief and went through this, why me and blah, 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 she let me wallow in my own pity. And then she said, "Why wouldn't you be chosen for this?" And I kind of stepped back and was like, "Wait, what?" Well, that wasn't what I had thought she would say. And she just made a comment. She's like, "Think about your influence and your positivity and your desire to help others." She goes, "You could change the world if you wanted to." And I sat back and I thought about it and I'm like, "You know what? I really can." Like, cancer doesn't have to be this dark cloud that everything is doom and gloom and bad. Although it's awful, I'm not going to negate that fact one bit, but there is this power in this your own self-discovery that you start to learn things in your journey that might have been important pre-cancer. But now it's not nearly as important after cancer. And I learned some profound things along that journey, but I wouldn't have gotten there without my friend Sherry, right? Everybody needs a Sherry, but then also that focus on positivity.
Absolutely. This choice, right? To live in fear, to live in the darkness, to live in, you said depression, like when we choose to live in fear or darkness, how does that work out for us? Like, does it feel good? Is that where we really want to be? Or is there another choice? Is there something different we can choose? And if we choose it, does it take us to a path that feels better? Like, I think we should, if we don't want to talk about positivity in dark times, in difficult situations, we should at least have the freedom to say, which path looks better? Which path feels better? Which path is more true to who I am? And then move forward from there. The thing about irrational optimism or positivity is we're not ignoring the struggle, right? We are
Right.
doing it despite the struggle. And I think that's where the power is. That's how you, like you said, change the world, change perspective about what's available to us, is that while we're living through something terribly difficult, we make a choice to find a different outcome or a different perspective. And that's why it's irrational. Right? It would make sense to be positive if everything was, like you said, rainbows and sunshine. It would make sense. But this is irrational because I am doing something that's really hard and it was forced upon me, and I don't want to be here. However, I'm going to continue to live true to myself and look for
Mhm.
the good, right? And that's why the optimism is actually irrational. Um, but it's also why it's inspiring and it's life-giving and it's important too. So I love that you found this same key to help you move forward in your journey. On the podcast, we talk about fear, isolation, and broken identity. Um, did any of these show up in your life while you're recovering from cancer and going through it?
Yeah. So I think that one of the areas that I've always focused on my life is that outer beauty. And when I got diagnosed, the first thing that went through my mind, well, probably not the first thing, but one of the top things that went through my mind was that I was going to look like one of those sphinx, the hairless sphinx cat. And I was so worried about that fear. And my husband at one point, at when we were shaving my head and I was just losing it, and there was pieces of me all over the floor, he made a comment that he said, "For so many years, you have focused on your external beauty." He goes, "But you're gorgeous on the inside. So maybe you should focus on that for a while." And I stepped back because my husband's love language is not word affirmation. But that's really what one aspect that I really learned about my identity is that it's not my hair, it's not my eyelashes, it's not having my nails done. My identity is that little bit of sparkle that I leave wherever I go, right? And whether I have all these outer things that had been accustomed to or to where I am now, it's different. And that is okay. But you have to learn and get to that identity that it's not broken. It's just like that redwood that you explained in your book, right? I love that description. It's not diminished beauty. It's prettier than it was. You just have to see that sparkle in the darkness.
And there's always going to be a part of us that cancer can't touch, right? There's Cancer
Mhm.
can take your hair, but you are not your hair. Cancer can
Yeah.
take your breast, but you're not your breast. You are more than that. You're more than the sum of each of these parts. And so learning to identify, like finding your identity in something that's not the cancer can't touch, the cancer can't get to, right? That is how we become transformed. That's how our identity becomes unshakable. Um, by releasing the pieces of us that are not actually truly us.
Mm.
I had this conversation with my children and I wrote it in the book as well, but just I asked them, if I lose my hair, am I still your mom, right? If I lose my breast, am I still your mom? If I can't get out of bed today, am I still your mom? Will I still love you? Will I still care for you and protect you? And the answer is always yes. I am not found in my physical strength or my hair. There's me that is so much more. And it is, though it's
Mhm.
hard to release our hair, I think every woman I've ever met cried and mourned for the loss of her hair. We can move beyond that moment and begin to treasure what can't be taken from us, right? We can start to make our treasure in that part of ourselves rather than these pieces that might come and go throughout life.
Yeah, 100%. You said that beautifully.
So, what can you tell me like a story? You just told me one about your husband, but can you tell me another story when like isolation or fear impacted you? Like you remember it showing up in a specific moment?
Yeah. One of the another thing that you said in your book where I found similarities were where you talk about a tornado. And when my doctor, I went in on, man, let's see, it was probably December 20th. And at the time, he had said, "Well, I know we don't have your PET scan results back yet, but right now I think you're a stage 2. Great news. Stage 2 is 100% curable." And so I'm like, this is great. Like, yep, it's not going to be that bad. I told this story to myself. And then I'm a huge Christmas buff. Like I love Christmas. In about a couple weeks, my Christmas tree is going up. Like as soon as the Halloween comes down, Christmas goes up. And so it was 2 days after Christmas, December 27th. And I went back in, my PET scan results were in, and the doctor had said, you're a stage 3B. And I said, okay, well, all I heard was stage 3, and that was a little too close for me for stage 4. And I didn't know enough about this journey to really decipher anything besides numbers. And I said, well, last week I was a stage 2, what is stage 3? That just doesn't make sense. And he said, well, the game changed. Well, I don't want the game to change, right? And so I asked a question that I didn't get the answer that I wanted to. And that question was, am I going to make it to next Christmas? And he said, I don't know. And from that moment, all I could think about was, I'm not going to be a wife. I'm not going to be a mom. All these things, all this identity, all my identity that I love more than anything in this world, I might not have. And then not only the suffering I was going to go through, but the fear of the suffering that they were going to go through. My son was so young that I'm like, he's not going to remember me. My daughter, who's older, who, I'm her world, I'm her mom. I'm like, how is she going to get through those awkward adolescent years without me? And I started thinking about all this. And so the doctor kept talking about this journey and what to expect. And, I didn't hear the hope that he had given me in that conversation because all I was doing was spinning. It was just that tornado that was sucking the life out of everything in that moment. And I think that as I talk to more and more people that have gone through serious health diagnoses, they they have that tornado, that fear, whatever we want to call it, but people have those similar experiences and it's hard.
It is so hard. And I agree with you. My first thoughts are going to my kids and my husband, I trust that my husband will be able to move on without me, but I just don't know about my children, right? Our heart is first and foremost turns to what about the kids? I remember walking around after diagnosed stage 4 and people would say, "What can I do for you?" And I would say, "Love my children." I don't know that I'll be here to love them, but somebody has to. And I mean, it makes me want to cry right even now, but love my kids. That's like the number one thing I want people to say. And it was actually out of that experience, that initial heart that I said last week in my interview, spoil my kids. Like that's
Hmm.
still my heart, is that my children are still living with cancer.
Hmm.
It's been 9 years, it's been their entire lives, and they have to deal with uncertainty and fear, and they need to be loved and spoiled. And there's some things that I would do for them, but I can't always. But I think that a mom's heart is to always love my kids, protect my kids, make sure my kids are okay. And also just the desire to be known. Even if we are, the question is, when us, the women, the patients are unsure about our own identity, it makes us even more insecure, or more, uncertain about whether our children will know us because we're struggling with our own identity, going, who am I now? What can I do now? Where's my value now? And then we look to our kids and say, they won't know who I was before. So, do they truly know me now when I'm not even sure about my own identity now and my own value? And it just makes that cycle, that tornado, like you said, even stronger because the questions are bigger than the answers, are more prevalent than the answers are.
Yeah, 100%.
But I love that our hearts are for our kids. And that's one of the reasons why all the work that we're doing, all the work I'm doing is really looking at the whole family, trying to address this for the whole family, which is just not something that's been done before. I think
No.
before now, we looked at a patient and we tried to make solutions for a patient. And now, as we shift our mindset away from the idea of a patient more to a person impacted by cancer, when we talk about people, we can see their life more. Patients are really just in a hospital or not. They're in the doctor's office or they're not. But a
Mhm.
person has a life, they have relationships, they have family. And the more that we can see this is a disease that impacts people, well, then the more likely we're going to see the children, the spouses, the families, the bigger picture of cancer's impact in life.
Yeah. And what I love how you just said it because I don't feel like people really understand the journey that your children and your spouse goes through, and they suffer in their own way. And it's an awful experience for many, but there is that spark of beauty if you can find it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we move on to that, I just want to acknowledge, yes, they are suffering in their own way. They don't have the physical sufferings that we have, but they have to sit there and observe them and they can't change them for us. They can't fix the problem for us. So they're just stuck there with their own fears, their own uncertainty. So in many ways, the loved ones we have in our life, they go through all the same emotional side effects of cancer as us. We are just the only ones who go through the physical side effects of cancer. And so it is, but they are linked with us in this whole experience. So yes, finding the sparkle. So tell me an example. What is the sparkle that you found in the dark places, in the hard times? What brought you joy during this experience?
We made a little list, trying to make things funny. And so one of the things is that my hair used to be very long. And so anytime that my husband and I would ride in the truck and he'd have the windows down, I'd be barking at him pretty quick to pull him up because hair was in my mouth, it was in my lipstick, now it's over my face, right? And so we never got to do fun stuff like that. So we started to make a little bit of a list, and one of the top things was, hey, guess what? We can ride with the windows down now, and you could enjoy it, and I'm not going to tell you to put it up. And so he was like, yay, there's a win, right? I got a bunch of different wigs. I got my professional wigs, but then I got a purple wig. My daughter had a unicorn wig, and my husband's like, this is going to be fun, right? So we just tried to make happy moments that we could experience and remember so that it wasn't all that doom and gloom, like I said before.
Awesome. I love that. And they can be fun, I think as long as you're not using them to hide something, like if we use them
Mhm.
to cover up or hide an insecurity, they can be so much fun. I know I have multiple multicolored wigs that I put on whenever we're just playing or doing something fun or having a fun family evening. So definitely, that is a perk that I would have never engaged in before. And then, what's a gift of cancer? What's something that cancer you experience enriching your life or your relationships that you don't think you would have experienced otherwise?
Being that type A personality and always trying to control things, cancer really taught me to take a step back and that I can't control things. And sometimes I have to be in the passenger seat. And it took me a long time to get okay with that. And so the mentality that I adopted was kind of twofold. It was first, it is what it is. So that became a very powerful statement for me, that instead of going on that roller coaster of emotions when something would happen, I would just be like, you know what? It is what it is, which then taught me to not sweat the small stuff, because I am very animated, I'm emotional, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and it's exhausting. So, getting that diagnosis and training my brain to then look at things through that lens really helped me almost plateau a little bit more, so that then I could step back and relax, because I had never had that relaxation. And I love how you said it at the beginning. We live in this environment where it's almost not okay. And there was times throughout my journey, I remember, even going through 5.5 months of chemo, I was still working 12 hours a day, many days. And I remember my husband sending me a text one night. It was like 6:35 at night. And he said, "You're not healing," because I was neutropenic. And he's like, "You're not healing because you're not resting." And I was so mad at that text, right? I was like, "Grr." But at the same time, I was like, you know what? He's right. And so I had to take a step back and then rest. And then actually yesterday, we live in Florida, so we've gotten hit with two hurricanes in a matter of 3 weeks. And fortunately, we had minor damage in comparison to many of our friends and our neighbors. But something happened yesterday that threw me in a little tizzy, made me in a bad mood, and I'm just miss negativity. And I sat there and a picture of my son came up when he got his tubes in his ears when he was like 13 months old, 14 months old. Cause I'm in my hair ponytail wig, like I remember I was going through my own journey. And I sat there and I looked at that photo and I said, you know what? If we are all healthy and if I'm as healthy as I can be for right now, life is good. Who cares about the other stuff? It's all replaceable because my family is not. And so it brought me back into this positivity state to say, okay, I'm just going to laugh at this. Like, whatever curveball comes now, like, it is what it is. I'm not going to sweat the small stuff.
And that's such a good lesson. And you get to carry that with you and share that with your kids. So they will be raised up in a culture in a home where this is how we see life. If we have each other, we're going to be just fine. And what a gift to them that that's just the only way they'll know how to see life. And it is freeing, right? It's freeing. And then you wrote a book. So tell me what inspired you to write this book and what it's about.
So, I've been a healthcare executive for 15 years. And as I started to go through my journey, remembering what my friend Sherry had said, is that I want to help others while they go through this process. And when you are a patient, many times you are impacted by friction point after friction point after friction point when you try to access care. So as I went through this journey, I recorded everything from every interaction to how the interaction made me feel to process errors I experienced, all these different things. Because as an executive, I understand why we do what we do in healthcare operations for the most part. But now here's how it feels as a patient going through it. And so the book is written as a diary of my experience where I call out healthcare at the end of most chapters to say, here's what went wrong, here's how to fix it, or I have no idea how to fix it, but we need to start discussing it. And so that is my gift to the world as a diary to have others experience similarities in journeys, but then also a healthcare process improvement book at the same time.
And what a gift to use your strengths, which is your career, and your weaknesses, which is this diagnosis and all these things, and to put those together, let those coexist in one place so that we can all grow. That's amazing. So thank you, Stephanie, for sharing that with us. Um, and thank you for sharing your story today. It's been wonderful talking with you. If this conversation has been meaningful, please check out our other episodes of the podcast and order our book. Stephanie and I have been talking about it some today. It's called Cancering, Exploring Seasons of Emotional Healing, and it's now available on Amazon. This book defines the pain points of cancer and helps lead you toward emotional restoration.